The Ravens signing 8-year veteran Nelson Agholor was a surprising move for me. Personally, it was surprising. I didn't think the Ravens were going to go slot receiver um, in free agency or trade or signing someone who's released. I thought it would be in the draft, to be honest with you. But surprising move in another sense because I thought the Ravens would need to hold on to as much cap space as possible to potentially match a deal another team might make to Lamar Jackson, particularly after the draft. Increasingly, it looks like that's when it's going to happen. Whether it's the Colts or whoever, it looks like the whoever offers Lamar a contract, it's going to be after the draft. I can't blame them for waiting after the draft and foregoing giving away what most people have called 2 picks. But really, if you're trying to get a franchise quarterback, you're really just giving away 1 pick because you would draft a first round. You would draft that quarterback in the first round anyway. So the way I look at it is you're really essentially only giving away 1 first round pick. But look, back to Nelson Agholor. 1 year, $3.25 million for a guy who primarily plays in the slot. I don't think this is move number one in terms of this offense. I don't think this is move number one in terms of the first chess piece, the biggest movement. I think this is like move number 3 for me, even though it occurred first. And what I mean by that is I think it sets the Ravens draft in stone. I think trade back options could alter things, surely, but since Agholor primarily plays in the slot, and the Ravens really don't have a proven guy there. I mean, don't get me wrong. Look, Devin Duvernay had a really great start last season. Devin Duvernay's a career 73% catch guy. I know a lot of those are on bunch screens and stuff like that, but he had a good start last year, and a lot of those were not bunch screens. They were man-to-man third down wins. I think he had 6 third down wins in the first 4 weeks of the season last year. 5 weeks, Devin Duvernay was 17 of 20 catches, 226 yards, 3 touchdowns. Finished the year 37 catches on 49 targets. So after the first 5 weeks, only was able to generate 20 catches thereafter. But look, to focus on the numbers, I think is missing the mark here somewhat as it relates to Nelson Agholor. I'm going to let some film run here. Probably going to go through the film twice. And the second time through, I'll annotate some of it for you and talk to you guys about some of the things I've seen. You will get some spot shadows pre-snap. Look, nobody expects Nelson Agholor or Devin Duvernay to have 70 catches in 2023. There's just too many guys who need the ball and too many guys who should get the ball. Not even to mention J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Lamar Jackson. But wide receivers and tight ends, let's just start here. Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews are going to be high target guys. They're going to be guys who get the ball a lot. Isaiah Likely, Devin Duvernay, who I mentioned. And now you've got Agholor, who's an 8-year vet, who won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. But, he's not lived up to certain people's expectations, I guess, since that time. I don't think the Ravens are really if you think the Ravens are done addressing wide receiver, let me know. I don't think that this is the only attempt on their part to address wide receiver. I think that this is the first move chronologically, but I think it's in their brain, it's probably the third step in the hierarchy, the third most important step, I guess. This does, however, tell me that what the Ravens think of the draft. They don't think JSN will be there at 22. They don't think Zay Flowers will be there at 22, and I agree with them. I do not think that either of those guys will be there at 22 when the Ravens draft. It looks like the Ravens are, if you ask me, trying to build something similar to what the Chiefs modeled in 2022, last year, winning the Super Bowl. So what I mean is, I'm not necessarily talking about getting rid of your best receiver in the case of Tyreek Hill. What I mean is stockpiling multiple talented guys who I guess some of you who think about the game differently than I do would call mid-level or above average. Like, I don't consider anybody in the NFL mid-level or average at that level relative to their peers. Yeah, there's certainly guys who are average receivers production wise, but let me explain what I mean. The Chiefs last year, 2022, besides Travis Kelce, obviously. So interesting there that they traded for Kadarius Toney, but in any case, also signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling to a 3-year, $30 million deal prior to 2022. And that's going to be where I'm going to make a point about Nelson Agholor. Like I said, I'm just letting some of these plays run. And you're welcome to have reactions to them if you wish. I'll try to break down some aspects of it, to be honest with you, the second time through here. My internet's running slow for whatever reason. And that's going to be where I'm going to start, in terms of MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. One of my favorite players. I loved what he did in the AFC title game. I think the Ravens' strategy should be looked at from that context. Whether they use pick 22 on a receiver, pick 86, or somehow recoup a second rounder. I think what they're possibly trying to do is stockpile as many 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" athletes as possible to create physical mismatches. As you see, a route from the outside for Nelson Agholor. He does play mostly in the slot. This is a route lined up at Z against the Packers. Are running, I think, a zone blitz here. So it's a 6-man coverage, 3 under, 3 deep coverage. And this concept beats this coverage every time in the NFL. It's interesting. NFL teams often run this coverage when this pass concept is coming. It's interesting to me how high the percent is that offenses run that concept over Yankee, whatever you want to call it, against zone blitz concept, 5-man rush, three deep, 3 under coverage. Happens a lot. But in any case, back to my thought that I had after seeing this signing. I think the Ravens are following that model. Did they pick the Chiefs out and say that's what we want to follow? No, I just think it's smart from one standpoint to say we're going to get as many guys who can win physical matches in the slot against some of the smaller nickels that we're going to see in the NFL in 2023. Todd Monken certainly had a lot of bigger athletes to use at Georgia. Agholor is not tall, 6 foot, 200, plays in the slot. He's a 60% career catch guy, so that's not a tremendously high percent. Don't get me wrong. However, back to MVS, and this is something I thought of today, thinking about multiple guys who can produce. It reminds me of the Chiefs and how they were able to overcome wide receiver injuries in the AFC Championship game against the Bengals. And did they intend to do that? I don't know, but that's the way it worked out. So let me explain. Mecole Hardman came back in the AFC title game from injury. Then he got hurt again, unfortunately. I think Kadarius Toney nearly caught a touchdown early in the game on pretty good coverage by Mike Hilton, and then eventually left with an injury. It might have been after that play, but I could be wrong there. I think Juju was hurt in the AFC title game. I may be wrong about that one, but I do know that he came back to play very well in the Super Bowl, particularly in the second half. One thing I know for certain is that the Chiefs probably do not win that football game if it isn't for Marquez Valdez-Scantling's absolute mismatch against Mike Hilton, who's one of the best nickel defenders in the game. And MVS is a career 50% guy, 50% catch guy, who signed, like I said, a 3-year, $30 million contract last year. And that was ultimately, if you ask me, the decisive matchup. Why am I mentioning that, referencing Nelson Agholor, as you see him fumble on a great play by Kyle Hamilton and then a great recovery by Marcus Peters in week 3? Well, the first 4 weeks of the year last year, Nelson Agholor showed promise. The game against the Ravens, he lit up Pepe Williams. I got him against the Ravens last year in week 3. I got him beating Marlon Humphrey 3 out of 5 times in terms of just winning the route. I got him beating Pepe Williams 2 out of 2 and Kyle Hamilton 1 out of 1. Now Marcus Peters, who you'll see a route against later, was Agholor was 0 for 2 against him. But this is kind of typical of what you see of him in the slot when you get man-to-man. It's just beating people on over concepts, in breaking routes, slants. And there's just a ton of separation on some of these plays early in the year. Apparently suffered a hamstring injury week 4, week 5, somewhere around there, and still dealt with it for a month because his snap count went down significantly. One game, 7 snaps. One game, 3. Another game, I think, 12 in the next 4 weeks, and then was inactive. Here he is on the left-hand side. I think this is against Sutton, who just signed, I think, for a pretty big deal. Look at the separation that he gets. This is early in the season. And some of these balls by Mac Jones, it's not like they're tremendously well thrown. I mean, this ball could be thrown further out in front. There's more separation way before the ball is thrown than there is at the catch point, meaning Mac Jones could have led him even further. Getting back to the MVS comparison and why I think this is a somewhat intelligent signing. That's not how I thought prior to watching this film, to be honest with you. It's a guy who plays in the slot, a guy who can win matchups as seen in the film. And I didn't have this thought until I watched the film. MVS torched Mike Hilton, 6 catches, 118. They probably don't score as many points as they do without his contribution. And to compare it to the rest of the team receivers in that game for the Chiefs, 8 catches, 43 yards, receivers. Don't discount the impact, and I refuse to, after watching the film here, of having 4 or 5 capable guys at receiver. I think this is a weird saying here. This is a low floor, high ceiling signing. Someone on Twitter said it best. This improves the lower end of the receiver core. There's no doubt about that. It improves the lower end of the receiver core. I don't think he's a great blocker, but he's a little more physical than people give him credit for. Here he is chipping the outside backer and then running the drag. The Patriots run a lot of these concepts. Very predictable offense, if you ask me. I'm talking about a slot running an over, someone else running, an under, and now from the other side, you've got Agholor running the drag. Essentially looks like mesh in some ways. A very predictable offense. I think Todd Monken, is his job to utilize the players that we'll have, the matchups, whether they're 6'1 receivers, whether they're 6'4 like Shamar Bridges, whether they're 6'2 like Rashad Bateman. But I think Bateman plays like a 6'3 guy. I think he's shown the ability to play big. And then we've got the big tight ends in Andrews and Likely. I think it's the offensive coach's jobs to find those matchups. And the reason why I mention MVS is when the Chiefs had multiple guys injured, they had depth at the receiver position such that their coaches could still find matchups to exploit. And they did it against one of the best nickel defenders in the league in Mike Hilton, like I said. With all of these guys available, Bateman, Andrews, Likely, Duvernay, Agholor, Shamar Bridges, I hope gets an opportunity this year. And whoever's drafted, they're going to draft a receiver. They have to. There's going to be a lot of footballs to throw around. Look, this is a predictable offense that he played in last year. I showed you the concepts, drew it up. There's his patented route, an in-breaking route, and it's basically flood concept with the running back having a choice route. Who in this case he decides to break it to the inside, but oftentimes he would bring it to the flats. There's pressure. They're beat off the right side of the offensive line. My point is, I think it was a pretty predictable offense, and Patriots fans and even some content creators broke it down last year how predictable a lot of their routes were. I think I'd like to add a 6'3", 6'4 guy to this group, and understand Shamar Bridges has that kind of potential with the size and jump ball ability that he showed in the preseason last year. You've got third-round guys potentially, but I think some of these guys are going to go in the second round. Jonathan Mingo, A.T. Perry, Cedric Tillman, Xavier Hutchinson, who I've never done a film study on or a Twitter video on, and then Dante Demas. The rest of those guys I've done YouTube studies on. I'll try to link them up here in a moment. It's draft previews. Another thing to mention, and I think this is something a lot of Ravens fans probably don't want to talk about, is it's weirdly smart to sign him because of positional versatility. I said low floor, high ceiling, and that doesn't sound right. Low floor, look, if he gets hurt and is unavailable often, like you saw from week 5 or 6 to about week 11 last year, then you're not going to get much out of Nelson Agholor. You're not going to get much out of anybody who's injured, right? High ceiling, if he's healthy and he's around, he can offer you a lot in the slot. That's one possibility, one end point. The other end point is he's healthy, but maybe Bateman's not, or maybe Duvernay's not at the beginning of the season. Maybe they're out for the first 6 weeks or something. Maybe their recovery doesn't go as planned. He can play outside, as you see from some of the film here. He can play in the slot. That's why I think for $3.25 million, this seems like a pretty astute signing. I'm not one of those people who's going to hyperventilate because we signed Nelson Agholor and not DeAndre Hopkins. I recognize the difference in the salary and the difference of making it happen. Lined up at X, lined up at Z, outside receiver, he didn't look too bad in some of the... I saved 62 or 64 plays. This one was one that caught my eye because of the physicality that he showed. He played really well in that Steelers game. I forget who it was. I think it was Kurt on Twitter mentioned it about how well he played against the Steelers. I'm not convincing myself that he's going to have 70 catches. He's not. But there's no reason why Nelson Agholor can't give us 45, 50 catches next year on 80 targets, maybe a little less than 80 targets, because the ball is going to have to be spread around so much. I would love to see Agholor and some combination of Bridges and either Mingo, Perry, or Tillman. I really like A.T. Perry because they provide insurance for Bateman early in the season. Best case scenario, overall, is that Agholor is the 11 personnel slot guy, meaning either Likely or Andrews is on the field, and he's playing mostly in the slot. But some of the reps outside don't look bad. I've already shown you some of them. Here's one against Marlon Humphrey. He's the best corner that we've got, and that's a win. He also won in the slot, the first or second play that I showed you earlier on. Marcus Peters, I think, blanketed him, like I said, 2 times out of 2. But this is a pretty good rep, and he makes Marlon look pretty bad with the outside release. I think that the positional versatility can't be really overstated. I think we're missing some of that with some of the reactions I see online, because he can play in the slot and he can play outside. This is the first rep that I showed you on a 3rd and 4 against Marlon, who's physical, we know that, and he wins. And again, that ball could have been thrown further out in front. There was more separation during the route than there was, and you'll see it here, than there was when the ball arrives. Another thing to think about is not just positional versatility, but alignment versatility. Since he can line up inside or outside, and we know that Mark Andrews can do that, we know that Isaiah Likely can do that, I'm going to make a point about our personnel groups. It's going to be a totally new world for Ravens fans and those of us that try to break down the game as best we can. Our 11 personnel next year is going to be 11 or 10, meaning Mark Andrews can slide out and play receiver, and you can put Nelson Agholor in the slot. Or you can put Mark Andrews in the slot and slide out Nelson Agholor to the outside, depending on who else your other 2 receivers are. Let's go a step further. Our 12 personnel group with Andrews and Likely on the field at the same time, presumably, it's 12 and 11. Because both of those guys, Andrews and Likely, they have wide receiver skills and tight end bodies. That's why I think this signing is actually not a bad signing at all for $3.25 million. Got to keep the guy healthy. To only post up his stats from last year is doing a disservice to the analysis, and I won't do that. $3.25 million, low salary. He should be motivated, right, to try to prolong his career. DJ Chark is one of those guys that didn't have that much impact last year. I think he only had 30 catches. It's not like DJ Chark has lit it up the last 2 years. 2021, I think he had 7 catches. I could be wrong there. He didn't play much in 2021. 2022, he only had 30 catches. So don't come at me with DJ Chark as an 85 catch guy. He's not. I really like him, but he's an X. And I think that's the point with this one that seems to be getting lost, is that this is a guy who generally plays in the slot, who can slide out and play outside, whereas DJ Chark was an X receiver, as an outside receiver. I think we're going to draft one of those, number 1. Number 2, it doesn't seem like to me DJ Chark was interested in Baltimore at all. At minimum, this is an upgrade at the slot receiver position for us, if you ask me. Way better than James Prochet as a slot receiver, just more accomplished, bigger, more versatile with his routes. I would say comparable to Duvernay as a slot, probably a little more polished, but Duvernay's catch percentage, I want to stretch that out and see how far that can go. Meaning, Duv's catch percentage last year was 75%. For his career, it's 73%. With more typical targets, could Duvernay still be a 68, 70% catch guy? I think it's possible. I think the Agholor signing, if you ask me, pushes Prochet, out and really puts into focus Duvernay's role in the offense, and even to a lesser extent Shamar Bridges. But Shamar Bridges will be challenged by whoever the Ravens draft, probably a 3rd-round pick. I suspect that this means the Ravens are going corner at 22 if we don't trade back, and then we're going wide receiver in round 3. If we don't trade back or recoup that 2nd-round pick, that would certainly provide a whole lot more versatility and a whole lot more options if you were able to get a 2nd-round pick and then address wide receiver, corner, possibly guard in some type of order. You guys let me know what you think. I think it's a good signing because it's a slot receiver, and we don't really have an accomplished slot receiver, even though Duvernay was on his way to having a good season last year. I think that Duvernay was injured somewhere around week 6 or something like that. You could see a difference in his kick returns, I thought. But for the insurance for Duvernay or Bateman returning to full health, I think that's where this is an astute signing, and got to give the guys credit for pulling it off. Someone who can win matchups in the slot as the film shows here. And hey, look, even you saw week 3 last year against us, against the Ravens, won some matchups against Kyle Hamilton, won a matchup, 2 matchups, excuse me, against Pepe Williams. Actually, obliterated Pepe Williams. I mean, let's just be honest. On both routes, I saw beat Kyle Hamilton on another route and got blanketed twice by Marcus Peters. I'm not one of those people that's going to react to something instantly, so some of my film study and content creation will be slower. I like to watch the film. My attitude was changed a little bit here. I didn't really have this type of opinion about Nelson Agholor before watching some of the film from last year. Really, the film from weeks 1 through 4, when he had, if I did my math right, last year, he had 14 catches on 17 targets last year through 4 games. 18 targets, 14 catches on 18 targets. And then in a confusing manner, like you said, there was an injury involved. Went through a stretch of 5 weeks where I only got 3 targets, 5 targets actually. And then over a 3-week stretch from week 12 to 14, had 21 targets and 13 catches and 1 touchdown. Then disappeared from the offense to finish the season. So really weird. You had 2 different stretches where he had impact. Then you had 2 different stretches, one related to injury, and then one near the end of the season, talking about the last 4 games, where he had 8 targets and 1 catch and really disappeared from the offense. Not sure what your impression is. I suggest watch a little bit of film before you make a judgment, because if we get the version of Nelson Agholor that we saw in weeks 1 through 4, and then again from weeks 12 through 14, if we get that version, I think we've got a guy who can contribute, and it's interesting to me to see what may or may not happen with it on the Demarcus Robinson front, because he's a guy that I really like and someone I think can contribute, but is generally not playing in the slot like Agholor is. Appreciate you guys' time if you watch this far. If you enjoy the content and you think other Ravens fans or other football fans in general might enjoy it, please consider sharing a link to it on social media to help the video get more reach.